Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar. We're going to be going through MXDR in action, the anatomy of a cyber attack. Just before I pass over to Marcus and MJ, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. So this webinar will be recorded. Everyone that's registered will be sent a copy of the recording to watch on demand, as well as the slides that we're about to go through. We also have a Q&A chat box which is open throughout the webinar, so please do pop any questions into there. And we've got some time at the end to go through any questions. Perfect. I'll hand over to you, Marcus.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Marcus Beer. I look after sales at Chorus, also joined by Mark. MJ, do you want to do a quick intro for yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending our webinar. My name is Mark Jones. I'm the head of cybersecurity at Chorus. I'm responsible for our MXDR services and our professional services from kind of a technical and operational standpoint. I've worked at Chorus for about 9 years. And before as head of cybersecurity, I was kind of an architect, so probably more technical in nature.
Awesome. Cheers, Mark. So yeah, today, as Lisa said, we're going to be going through the anatomy of a cyber attack. In terms of an agenda, I'll go through, I suppose I'll kick off and go through the current cybersecurity landscape and what we're seeing. MJ will go through the anatomy of a cyber attack. That will also include some demonstrations. Then we'll chat about some of the preventative actions you can take to reduce cyber risk and some of the response stuff that you can do. I'll then go through our MDR and MXDR services, and we'll have some time at the end to go through some questions. So a quick outline of Chorus. We are a managed security services provider, MSSP, and we deliver a Microsoft-based 24/7 cybersecurity operations center that is really focused on containment and isolation based actions via a channel model. We are members of the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association, MISA, and we're also a Microsoft verified MXDR solution provider, which essentially means that we've been audited and accredited by Microsoft to be delivering MXDR and MDR services to the highest level. So in terms of the current cyber landscape, we always kick off with some statistics. Some of these might be a repeat from previous webinars, but from the stats that we see, it takes around an hour and 12 minutes is the average time for an attacker to access private data if you fall victim to a phishing email. So pace to respond and take action is absolutely key. 9.6% of ransomware incidents are taking place during daytime hours, which means over 90% are taking place overnight. So having that service or having that capability 24/7 is really important. Oh, sorry, Lisa. Have you got sound issues or?
No, I don't think so. If people can just pop in the chat box if they are struggling with sound, that'd be great. But it might be just a one-off issue.
Cool. Yeah, no worries. I'll carry on, but please let us know. In terms of the most common day of the week the single most common time for a cyber attack is Friday evening, so late at night. Which is ultimately resulting in around 60% of all organizations globally will be outsourcing or leveraging MDR-based services by 2025. So there is a significant uplift, and that will increase over the next couple of years. What does it look like today? So cyber attacks are becoming far more frequent and far more sophisticated. You don't necessarily have to be a technical genius to pose a threat to an end customer or MSP or whoever. It is less about the industry. It's more about the weak points in a customer. And this is happening in the small to medium businesses up to large enterprises. You can even hire a ransomware as a service. So these sort of things are becoming easy and becoming scalable. There's real pressures to address multi-cloud environments, whether it's multi-cloud, on-premise, and being able to do that is highly complex. And on top of that, we have an increasingly complex landscape of regulatory requirements. A lot of you will be familiar with NIS2 that's coming into play. The UK are also upping their requirements for legislation for cybersecurity, and also other countries around the globe. And that is why a lot of people are looking to leverage partners such as Chorus in order to support that motion. And I'll hand over to Mark, who's going to chat through some of the cyber challenges that organisations face today.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Marcus. So I think Marcus summed it up really well. You know, we have every company has this growing risk of cyber attacks, right? And cyber attacks can cause all kinds of damage. You know, there's obviously loss of customer trust. You know, there's fines for breaches of certain regulations. You know, private data could be stolen. Important, you know, company data could be stolen, and it is a big risk for and a growing risk for every organization. And every organization really needs to do something about it. Obviously, we've got some more stats here of 32% of UK businesses identified a cyber attack in 2023, and we're not seeing those numbers come down at all. Also, Marcus talked about, you know, you can buy ransomware, like they have an affiliate model. There's an adversary in the middle kits that you can rent. These things are becoming it's becoming more and more specialized. There are access brokers who sell access into networks. There are people who just do phishing, and kind of attackers whereas they used to need to understand everything end to end. It's now broken up, and people specialize in different things. And what are they trying to achieve? What are their objectives? They're either trying to steal data, or they're trying to get money. And for that reason, they're ruthless. They don't care about which vertical they're attacking, and they're looking for the weakest targets. And a lot of the protection efforts is making yourself a much more difficult target to attack than other similar sized companies. I think there's all kinds of misunderstandings about, you know, attackers aren't after smaller companies, but we know that's not true. Smaller companies are quite frequently targeted because attackers know they typically have weaker defenses, and breaches are becoming more pervasive and impactful. We see attacks targeting MFA, so adversary in the middle. All kinds of token theft attacks at the moment we see in our SOC are really, really common. I'll show you one of those a bit later in the demo section. But we're seeing lots of new attacks, and the time it takes for attackers to get access to private information or to do something with their access when they get it is coming down as well. We see we used to talk about like these 180-day periods where it would take for attackers to be in your network before they did something, and then it talked about the stat came down to 90 days. And now I think realistically for some attacks it's automated. As soon as they have access, they'll start pulling all the information they can, and it's really scary how quickly attackers can get access to information you wouldn't want them to when a user, even a user with MFA, falls victim to one of these attacks. And there's a lot of implications, growing implications, which Mark's also talked about in terms of regulatory compliance and how quickly you need to disclose things, and even those things are changing as well with NIS2, which kind of takes me on neatly to really quickly touching on the NIS2 objectives. In Europe, obviously NIS2 is going to be required from the 17th of October. We're still waiting to see exactly how every country puts this into law, but we know it will be put into law. And we also know that UK NIS 1 is going to increase in scope and in requirements. And some of it's really targeted around prevention, so processes and policies and security measures. That would be your kind of managed security risk and you're protecting against cyber attack. And the other half of it, the C and D section, detecting cybersecurity incidents and minimizing the impact of cybersecurity incidents, is on like after the breach happens, detecting the breach and what you do after. And you obviously need to put a lot of preparation and planning into what you're going to do on both sides. And I think NIS2 really highlights that there's an identified growing need for better cybersecurity across all organizations. And and is really a minimum standard that we're expecting now across Europe and also in the UK with UK NIS 1. That there is a requirement now for everyone to kind of up their game in terms of what they do around cybersecurity. You know, really it's kind of a crazy world out there. We see attackers research their targets. They know their financial records. They know how much they can afford. They're very ruthless in terms of ransomware attacks. You can see some examples on your screen right now of ransomware actors who are A, merciless, and B, very aware of the kind of financial records of a company they're attacking, and they'll kind of push for the biggest ransom they can push for. And it's really kind of a scary world out there. Now let's talk about attack planning, and I think it's good to point out that there are lots of different types of attacks, and there are new attacks that come out every day, but broadly speaking, they kind of all follow the same steps. And we have on this slide kind of prepare, enter, traverse, execute. Some of you might be aware of the MITRE ATT&CK framework that also talks about these kinds of steps. And broadly speaking, even if the attacker's aim is to just destroy everything, delete all your VMs, cause havoc, or even if they want to ransomware you, maybe they just want to steal data, they kind of are going to follow the same steps to get there. And you know, they're going to start with researching your organization. I'm looking for a way in. Obviously, they have initial access when they find that way in. So it could be phishing, it could be attacking some kind of vulnerable device that's internet facing. It could be attacking a website or an API, or it could be some credentials they've bought on the dark web or have been able to brute force. You know, credential pairs are sold now at kind of crazy prices on the dark web. It's something like 1,000 working credentials are sold on the dark web for a couple of dollars, basically, or the equivalent of a couple of dollars. And once they have that access, they can obviously move laterally around the network and through different devices and different accounts. And some more good stats for you. 1 hour and 52 minutes is the average time it takes an attacker to laterally move to a second device after breaching a first device. And 1 hour and 12 minutes is the kind of mean time it takes for after a user falls victim to a phishing email for an attacker to have their hands on some sensitive company data. So the times have really come down, and we need to stay ahead of those times, right? We're talking, these things happen very quickly. But the whole idea of this lateral movement is they're looking for a privilege account to compromise. They're looking to map out the environment, and they're looking to achieve domain dominance. And when they have a privileged account or a domain admin or a cloud admin account, they can really do whatever they want to do and kind of fulfill their mission, whether that is ransomware, whether that is just stealing data, or whether that's just causing disruption. You know, sometimes there's political motivations to some of these attacks, and you'll see attackers just try and cause as much havoc as they can, delete backups, to destroy VMs. Crypto jacking as well, where they want to deploy a lot of expensive cloud resources and mine cryptocurrency for themselves. Similar kind of story. They're going to go through the same process, try and get that privileged cloud admin user, and then deploy those VMs. And that brings us on to the next slide, which is really talking about a kind of crypto jacking scenario. So this happened over a bank holiday weekend in the UK. So again, a good example of attackers waiting for a time where they knew that there's very unlikely to be a quick response, and they're going to have the most time to fulfill their objective. This all happened over a bank holiday weekend. It was very calculated, and basically they got access to an Azure account. They span up lots of very expensive graphical VMs. You can only deploy a certain number of them per region, so they deployed them in every single Azure region they could. And when the business came back on the Tuesday after the bank holiday weekend, their Azure bill was over, I think, £250,000. So a lot of damage was done in that time. And these are kinds of the detections that would have happened along that journey. So we see the initial compromise through password spray associated IP addresses. We see unfamiliar sign-ins. We see risky users identified. And then in Defender for Cloud, we have kind of some suspicious role assignment detected, where the attackers have kind of taken over an account, and they're trying to get to the point where they can deploy those VMs to do their own crypto mining. And then we've also got alerts for suspicious core quota increases across multiple regions. I said they were deploying those virtual machines, very expensive virtual machines across every region, and there would have been detections for that as well. And also we see suspicious creation of computer resources. So in that kind of cryptojacking scenario, which is a real attack that really happened, this is the kind of alerting that you would have got during that. And you can see these things do create alerts, but the important thing is having people in place to respond to these. And in that scenario of a bank holiday weekend, you need to make sure you have people in place to take a quick response to when these incidents fire and understand what's going on and be able to take the right disruptive action to stop these things quickly. Attackers will target you when they think that you're poorly defended. And we also talked about those times, right? Being under 2 hours to really effectively get ahead of the attackers in what they're doing. It's very important that we're able to intercept as quickly as possible. So now we're gonna go through a couple of different cyber attack scenarios and show you kind of the demo. The first one I wanted to do was kind of talking about the token theft that we talked about that was really common at the moment. And there are a couple of examples of this. There's kind of adversary in the middle and some adversary in the middle kits you can get, which are open source, very easy to use. They let you phish tokens. I'm going to show you a different type of attack. This is device code phishing, which is again something we've seen really happen to customers. And also in terms of incident response, we've seen customers fall victim to these types of attacks and help them figure that out after the fact and clean up. And really, I think it's a really good point in talking about like the modern day cyber attacks and the time it takes for attackers to get their hands on very sensitive data. So I will share my screen now and we'll walk through that first demo. And then the second demo I have is kind of just talking through side by side a more classic attack of an exposed virtual machine, in this case a server, and being able to manipulate that vulnerability present on that server. And I'll be able to show you what happens on the attacker side and on the defender side when we do that. So let me share my screen quickly. And hopefully you can all see my screen now.
I can see that, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. So first of all, this is my kind of attacker machine, and this is based in Johannesburg. So I'm just showing you the difference in machines. So I've got one virtual machine that's based in, one virtual machine that's based in Johannesburg, and I also have another virtual machine, which is kind of my victim virtual machine, which is I do the same thing there. You should see I'm in London, right? So the attacker machine's in London. The user machine, sorry, the user machine is in London. The attacker machine is in South Africa. And I have this user called MFA user, which has MFA. And I'm going to do this device code attack against this user and show you what that would look like. So if we switch back to the attacker machine, in Johannesburg, I've kind of already got this terminal open. Excuse me. I've already got this terminal open, and I've kind of imported this module called Token Tactics, which is kind of an open source, freely available thing to do these types of attacks. I'm going to get an Azure token like this. I can choose the device platform, and in this case, it's going to default to a Windows machine using the Edge browser, and I get this user code basically. And then on the victim's machine, I would have to come up with a ploy to get them to go to this page, device login, and enter that code. And we see certain tactics like there's been suspicious activity on your account. Please verify this is you. We see other types of methods to do this. It's also important to be aware of the fact that not every phishing attack is going to come through email. We've also seen an example of LinkedIn mails being the way to phish users. We also see web chats and things like that being another avenue to phish users. And I'm just following this device code flow. You can also see you can manipulate the URL. So it's a very, I'll just go to that again. It's a very legitimate URL here. This Microsoft.com/device login. And I can also kind of manipulate that and put anything I like afterwards to help me sell it to the victim. Let's assume that I managed to make a user do that and put in the code I want to. If I go back to my attacker machine now, you should see all of this this noise essentially, which shows me that I have captured the access token and the refresh token. If you control session tokens in your environment, then they'll be able to be used for as long as you've set. By default, it's 90 days. So you think one user falls victim to that, and it's easy for one victim to fall user to that, even if they have MFA. Then they've technically given me access to their Microsoft 365 account for 90 days if you don't do anything about it and if no one intercepts. The right kind of response to this, if you were able to detect this, and we can detect this on the SOC, would be to revoke sessions for that user. Once I revoke sessions, I kind of invalidate this access token and the refresh token, and I would cut off this access for the user. But in terms of how quickly this can be used to do something bad, if I show you, let me just get the access token up. I'll just copy this token out, and I already have a Python script ready to go here. And this is a really simple Python script that is basically using the graph to get all email. And when I pull the email down through the graph, through the Microsoft graph, I am just going to copy it to my machine, basically save all the emails. So if I just let's run that. And you can see I've just downloaded some email there. And you can see I've got copies of all the emails. I mean, we can just quickly show you that was the phishing email I clicked on in the first place. And you can see that took very little time after the user in this case gave access or gave away their access token. It takes very little time to start being able to do things. There's also tools like Graph Spy that kind of put a graphical interface on this. And we could do other things. We could send Teams messages through having access to their access token. And you could use maybe use the Teams access to phish other users. We could send email and phish other users, or phish partners that this organization works with. That's another common strategy. And it's very difficult with these kinds of attacks to see what exactly an attacker has done. The only way to get access to kind of the Microsoft Graph audit logs is to switch that logging on, and it's not on by default. It's kind of a preview feature, so it's difficult after the fact that this has happened to really understand exactly what's happened, exactly what files an attacker has had access to, and what they've done in the time they've had access to that account. And oftentimes on our SOC, we might see a user fall victim to this type of attack, and even assume that we can respond very quickly within 10 minutes. There's a small chance that that user might have had access to some files in that 10-minute time, which obviously in our SOC we'd be trying to figure out once we detect this and take the right response action, which in this case would be revoking sessions and making sure nothing's happened to the account while the attackers have had access to it. So this is kind of a cloud-based attack going after the access tokens, and hopefully that's interesting to you. If I just quickly stop sharing, and then I'll get up the next scenario and share that one again, and we can have a look through that. So hopefully you can see my screen again. On this occasion, on the left side of your screen, you'll see an attacker on a Kali Linux machine, and they're going to be targeting a server. They have a web browser up on the right of their screen, and on the right of the screen here we have the defender side. So we have what we see in Sentinel, if you use Sentinel, or in our MXDR service, what kind of things would happen alongside the attacker targeting the device. And at the moment, the attacker is doing some kind of scans against this server. This server is kind of been set up deliberately to be vulnerable, and you can see that we've kind of done a port scan to find this server. You can see that it has some ports open like RDP, 8080. We've had a look at what's on 8080, and there's some files there, including a scheduled task to clean up database log files. And now we're going to kind of try and scan 8080 and see what we can find there. Are there any hidden sites or anything? And on the right side of the screen, on the Sentinel side, you can see that we are able to detect a port scan. So we know that someone's tried to scan that. We refresh now, we're able to see that there's an uploading scripts alert, and we can see that the attacker is trying to start a reverse shell, which means they're trying to get kind of command line access to that virtual machine. And I think in this case, the virtual machine is a Windows Server 2012 R2 box. And basically they've overwritten the database log cleanup.batch file, and they're going to make it launch a script essentially, or launch a script that calls a reverse shell. So we need to wait for the scheduled task to be run, and then when it runs, it will run our script, not the original script, and we should have kind of command line access to that virtual machine. So we get to see the alert. We can see uploading scripts. We can go into that and we can have a look at what it's seen. It gives us paths to the files. It shows us what server is being targeted. It shows us the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and where in the MITRE ATT&CK framework we are, and what tactics and techniques this falls under. And we kind of have to wait for that scheduled task to be run and to run our kind of Python script that's going to do a reverse shell. And you can see even at this point, there's some evidence through incidents of some manipulation happening. And it's good to point out that in our service, our kind of mean time to acknowledge an incident is less than 5 minutes. So really less than 5 minutes after these alerts fire, we would start our investigation. Before it even got to this point, we'd have analysts on this. We can see on the right, we've got the investigation graph up, and Sentinel does a really good job of correlating different incidents. And you can see how it's kind of combining these incidents because they are related to the same entities. Now we've uploaded the that log file. We're about to launch our reverse shell. And we've loaded up Metasploit, which is kind of a framework of exploits. Just setting the Metasploit parameters there. And on the right, you can see the investigation graph of everything that's happened so far, and all the evidence that's been correlated as we do the initial stages of kind of learning how to manipulate the database log file. So I think we'll run that exploit now on the attacker machine, and I think we'll soon see a lot more alerts trip up. So
MJ,
now
we've also got a good question in the chat. I just wanted to jump on if that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
So question just saying, just to be clear, in your first demo, the 2FA is largely useless in this situation because the session ID does not require further validation.
Yes, yeah. Basically, yeah. There's a lot of attacks that manipulate the tokens, and yeah, MFA doesn't help with those kinds of things. Adversary in the middle is also hugely popular at the moment. MFA doesn't help with adversary in the middle. When you go through MFA, it provides you with the tokens. Obviously, those tokens, once you give those tokens, they already validate MFA. With adversary in the middle, you just take the tokens or the cookies and you import them somewhere else, and you're already in the account past MFA. So yeah, it doesn't really help in this scenario. But the things that do help are obviously restricting how long sessions are used for, and also device compliance is a really big one, being able to do device compliance. But back on this, obviously we have access to the machine. We're doing all kinds of manipulation now. We're trying to rip off hashes for accounts and doing all the type of regular attacker things you'd expect to see. And we'll jump back to the incident queue in a second, and you should see that we've got a huge amount of noise in Sentinel based on what's going on. You can see, looking through the investigation graph, it's tying all the file hashes, all the IP addresses, all the processes that have been called, and pointing out everything that's happened. And we have this kind of command line access to that machine. So you can see on the left side of the screen is an Azure VM. That's like the Windows file system, and we have command line access to that. Bit concerning. You'd want something to happen at this point. And we've uploaded basically our own kind of malicious scripts to that machine now. We're looking at what patches is this missing, what reg keys are vulnerable, is there anything on this machine that we could manipulate further? And you can see it's returning loads of reg keys that we can manipulate, and giving an attacker more information on how to elevate their privilege to like admin privilege, or maybe rip off a domain account that we could use to move between other virtual machines. You can see on the right, we've kind of reclassified this as a high severity incident, and we're assigning it to ourselves. We're going to pick that up. You can see the correlation that's going on. So it's pulling in multiple alerts into that one incident, which is something Sentinel is very good at. And then hopefully we will soon see the response action being taken. So we should be able to see what happens when we respond to one of these alerts. And you can see the list there, probably difficult to read, but we have multi-stage incident, reverse shell, suspicious registry, modification. There are a lot of alerts now that are tied to this incident. And again, if we look through the activity log, you can see some enrichment here. You can see people assigning themselves to it. You can see kind of all of this tying together. And I'll just jump forward to taking a response action now. We jump forward a little bit. You can see kind of a list of all the reverse shell stuff. I want to get to the point where we're taking a response action. So we've got the reverse shell connection success. Here we go. We'll just go from there. So we've decided, and we'll probably get to this point much faster, but if we go from here, we're just the last thing we're gonna do is run a playbook. So we talked about how our services are all response services, and we have a big focus on taking response action, taking containment action. We're gonna show a really quick example here of running a playbook against this incident. And in this case, we're going to just isolate the machine. So there's obviously clear evidence. There's, at this point now, a lot of alerts and incidents pointing to this virtual machine being compromised. You can see Luke, who in this case is the attacker, has already messaged. And you can see on the other side of the screen they've been cut off, right? So we've isolated that machine. We'd be able to look through all of these alerts: credential harvesting, sensitive information lookup, registry modification, port scans, uploading scripts. We've got all the telemetry we need to figure out what's happened here and make sure it hasn't happened to any other virtual machines. There's not been lateral movement. And we'd be able to launch kind of our major incident process at this point and find out exactly what happened, issue reports, and build up a remediation plan for what we need to do. And so that's a good kind of scenario of what it looks like from the attacker side and the defender side. And it's kind of reassuring that you do get all of the incidents. I mean, even with the access token stuff I showed you in the demo before, there is alerting for that. There are things that are going to come up, but it's making sure you have the right people and the right processes to respond to those things as you need to. If we can throw the slides back up, Marcus.
Yeah, no problem. Lisa, do you want to read out? I was going to say, we've got
well.
2 questions that cropped up.
And it's just on the demo. Nice demo. At what point would your SOC have closed the attack down?
I think very early on you saw kind of uploading scripts. I think that would be a immediate red flag. Last month, our mean time to acknowledge was 3 minutes. So realistically, it would take 3 minutes for an analyst to start working that incident. I think when you see the uploading scripts section, so before they've even got the reverse shell, we would have taken a response action in that case, according to our processes.
And how much of this can be automated? So when an alert is generated, can that be automatically shut down?
It can be. I mean, you have the technical choice to do that, but I'd say that's kind of a reckless decision. I think that there's a lot made of automated responses and having automated responses and what you can do with SOAR capabilities, but it all relies on having people that understand what they're looking at, right? So I always want the services are always human-led. There is a human in the loop at all points. And really, you need to understand what you're looking at. You need to understand what's happened. If you just set an automated response action, so whenever there's this alert, isolate what's affected, you can cause real business interruption that way. Some things are going to trip up those detections that might be false positives, and you could cause more harm than good in that way. But technically, it is possible. It's just good to have the right people in place to be able to take the right kind of response actions and know what the right thing to do is, and be able to understand what they're looking at.
And I suppose then you immediately let the attacker know that you're onto them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the other side of it. Yeah, you need to understand. You can't give away that you're onto the attacker, and before you understand the full scope of the breach, right? So it's important not to rush into it before you understand what's happened.
Amazing, thank you. No other questions at this point. We'll save any others to the end.
So I'll just run through really quickly. I think we're maybe behind time slightly, but quick wins. So what can you do? We always talk about zero trust principles, and zero trust I think is a great approach. It's important you understand where you are or where the business that you support, if you're an MSP, is. It's really important to implement MFA. Obviously, I showed you an attack that bypasses MFA, but MFA is still a really, really important control. Raises the bar on the types of attacks that you fall victim to. Yes, there are attacks that work against MFA, but also you're largely getting rid of any kind of password-based attacks. If people find out passwords of your users, it still doesn't mean they're getting into those accounts if MFA is properly implemented. So still a really important process. Getting visibility of all your assets, making sure your patch management is sound, making sure you're carrying out regular user awareness training, phishing simulations, making sure that security is championed in the business, making sure you cover personal devices that have access to company data, or BYOD devices, and make sure you attain cyber essentials or something like that. There's a lot of the basics you can do, and if you do them well, you really will move the needle on your cybersecurity posture. And like we say, you're trying to make yourself a more difficult target than other businesses. Attackers are going to look for easy targets, and you want to make sure you're not an easy target. And then on the other side, responding, you need to make sure that you have a plan in place when there's a really high severity vulnerability, when these alerts happen. Do you have the right processes in place? Do you have the right people in place around the clock to be able to take the right kind of response? And that's a challenge, right? You need you need skilled staff who know what they're doing. You need the right processes and procedures in place. You need 24/7 coverage, because we know attackers are going to target you when they think that you're not looking. So it's important to think about if you had a breach, if this kind of alerting happened overnight, what would you do? How would you handle it? Do you know who needs to be involved, what their roles are, what the responsibilities are? Do you have an incident response plan? Is it up to scratch? Does it fulfill your needs? And also, on the other hand, if there's a huge vulnerability that's announced or some supply chain thing that's happened, what do you do? Is there a process to deal with emerging threats? Because that can also come up quite often when you have some kind of compromised piece of software that might be in use. So AnyDesk is like a recent example of that. Some versions of that got compromised, and that's something you want to take really quick response action to find if that vulnerable version is used in your environment, where is it used, and what can I do about it? So again, you need to have proper processes in place for these things, which kind of brings us on to our MXDR services, and I'll hand over to Marcus to talk through those quickly.
Cheers, Mark. We've only got sort of 2 minutes left, so I'll go through these next slides, and any questions we'll dive on to the end. But these services that are available to our partners, they come in 3 flavors. The first is MDR endpoints, manage, detect, and respond. That is focused on bringing log sources from Defender for Endpoint, and we also cover entry ID identities in that service as well, managed 24/7 via Chorus. We also have MXDR Advanced and MXDR Premium. Advanced is focused on customers using the wider Defender logs, so Defender for Office P2, Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, and so on. It's focused on the Microsoft logs. And MXDR Premium is everything I've just outlined, but also includes custom Sentinel integration. So we can't assume that all of our customers are going to be using the wider Defender logs to bring in, extended sources. We also have a wide variety of firewalls, other security products that customers want to bring in. What we really focus on, which Mark's touched on in the demos, is our containment and isolation-based response actions. We will be taking action on behalf of you and your customers, and we use an AI and kind of human-in-the-loop type message. So we combine automation and skilled people to deliver our services. And Mark alluded to our response times. Mean time to acknowledge is below 5 minutes. I think it's around 3 minutes at the moment for all our customers. And mean time to close is below the 20-minute mark. And I suppose linking to the automation question earlier, around 50% of all of our incidents are handled using full automation, and the rest are using some sort of automation or enrichment to make us really targeted and efficient in what we do. Microsoft for Security, a lot of you will be familiar with the Microsoft offering, but it does provide us extensive visibility. The offering has, I suppose Microsoft have over 73 trillion signals that are analysed daily. They're continuing to invest, and it is seeing increased demand of people looking to consolidate their security to I suppose, less products. And to reduce the complexity in their environment and just simplicity for them to understand what it is they're actually buying. And this is the final webinar in a series of 4. So obviously we went through the anatomy of a cyber attack today. There's 3 other webinars that are available on demand. One's focusing on the market opportunity, another's focusing on the NIS2 standards. The other is focusing on AI and Copilot for security, and then you've had today's webinar as well. So if any of those pique your interest, please feel free to request the recording and we can get that over to you. And yeah, any questions? I think we're 1 minute over. I actually threw through that last bit, but Lisa, are there any questions that you've seen, or should we wrap
Yeah,
up?
we've got a few. So just to remind everyone, if anyone does need to hop off, the recording will be sent to everyone, and you can respond to that email with any questions if we haven't had time to answer them. But I will go through just a couple. We've got one come in. Would implementing FIDO2 MFA methods add any additional protection against man-in-the-middle attacks?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You know, FIDO2 and obviously passkeys are the really interesting one that are kind of fresh onto the scene, particularly in Microsoft 365 world. I think passkeys are phishing resistant and would help with these types of things. Yeah, we should. I think soon we'll move to those types of authentication methods. I think passkeys is the really interesting one. I think everyone's got like a mobile phone, right? And I think there's been issues before with like actual physical FIDO2 keys, and rolling that out to larger organizations. I think everyone has a phone, so everyone can use a passkey. I think that's something we're going to see rolled out or become the default standard now. Yeah.
Amazing. How do you deal with multi-territory organizations that have different cybersecurity frameworks?
That's a complicated question to answer, but I think it's all about kind of aligning to certain standards. So in terms of Chorus and our cybersecurity services, all our customers we align to like CIS benchmarks, and we're kind of using a lot of standards, a lot of different a lot of these regulatory frameworks have like overlapping standards, right? So making sure that you have like an overarching framework that you align to, like NIST is pretty much what most of these are based on. You can kind of make that the default de facto standard, and then in the different territories where you have slightly different requirements, is really like identifying where they are. But you know, if you're using the same kind of benchmark and framework for everything, those differences in territories are normally very small, like just little things.
I'm going to do one last one, so we're going to miss a couple, so please do reply. And just to confirm, the recording and the slides will all be emailed to everyone, so you'll get a copy. How do you measure how well your security is?
It's that's a really, well, we could do another 45 minutes on that, I think. It's difficult. I think like obviously we can look at like the telemetry we get through Sentinel. There's so many aspects to security. It's really difficult to just point out one metric we can use to measure how well we're doing. I think obviously there's secure scores in Microsoft 365 territory that can help in like give you a measure of your security posture and recommendation actions. You also want to look at your response times to incidents. Make sure that you're looking at things like user awareness training and phishing simulations. How many users fall victim to phishing attacks, and is that improving? Pen testing is also important. It's really difficult. There's no like this is good and it will always be good. Every week things change. You know, if you're really well secured one week, the next week some huge vulnerability could be announced in a piece of software that's critical to your business, that lowers that. So it's a lot of different factors. I think looking at pre-breach and security posture, there's obviously solutions for security posture management that are a good way to measure how you're doing in terms of security posture. And like I said, aligning to like standards like CIS and making sure you're using those frameworks. And then post-breach, it's all about lessons learned and response times and mean time to respond, and those kinds of metrics. But there's so many things we look at, even internally in our CSOC. There's a lot of data we analyze to see how we're doing and how we're performing.
Amazing. Cheers, MJ. We'll wrap up there. I mean, if people want to hear more on that, maybe that can be a future webinar. So yeah, as promised, the video will be shared so you can watch it back on demand and share it, and also a copy of the slides that we've gone through today. If we haven't had time to answer your question, if you just reply to the email, that will come to me, and then I can ask it to the relevant person and get a response to you. Thanks very much, guys, and thanks for everyone for attending.
Cheers all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.